During this recording, we are going to talk through Litera's Best Authority functionality. Best Authority is a component of Litigation Companion, and Best Authority is designed to help us quickly, easily, and effectively generate tables of authorities. During the recording today, we're going to walk through a high-level demonstration of how we can use Best Authority to generate a table of authorities. We'll talk through the process of scanning a document, tailoring the content that you will include in your table of authorities, and then ultimately generating a TOA. Now, if you have any questions in follow-up to the recording, please feel free to reach out to Litera. To get started, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what we can see on screen right now. So we have a document open in Word. You'll notice that I'm currently selected my Litera tab, and I have a bunch of Litera functionality within this tab. Now, during the recording today, we are going to focus on Best Authority functionality. That's our Best Authority button right here. So all those buttons to the left and to the right, we can come back to at another time. To start Best Authority, I'm going to go ahead and click the Best Authority button, and then I'm going to begin by clicking Startup. This begins the process of scanning your document. The first thing that we need to do here is to select the scheme that we're going to use in order to scan this document and build our table of authorities. We won't dive into the nitty-gritty of customizing schemes or what schemes are used for, but fundamentally what schemes let us do is select the rules that we're going to use when we scan this document and generate our table of authorities. What this means is that you're more than likely going to have schemes that are built for each of the jurisdictions that you're generating a table of authorities in, because that scheme is going to allow us to control the settings that by default are used to generate a table of authorities. Now we're going to go ahead and start by selecting our sample scheme. We'll click OK. And the next step here is to set our scan range. This is just telling Best Authority which parts of the document we're going to scan through to identify authorities. We'll go ahead and click Set once it comes to the right location, and you'll notice that Best Authority is pretty darn good at guessing which parts of the document we're going to want to scan through. So in this case, I didn't need to change anything. Then lastly, it's going to give us an option to tell it where we want to put the table of authorities. Again, it's pretty darn good at guessing which page our TOA should go on. And if I zoom out here a little bit, you can tell that this is just the page immediately after my table of contents, and that is exactly where I want my TOA to go. So we'll go ahead and make that selection. We can go through and change our scan options here, or we can click Scan and Review. Now, once we click that Scan and Review button, this is going to read through our document and identify those authorities that will ultimately be included in our TOA. You can see that once we've gone through and run that scan, we can see our scan results. And we're presented with a couple of things. Over on the left-hand side, we can see a task pane. And this task pane contains all the results that Best Authority has identified. Over on the right-hand side, we have our document. Now, this is still our Word document. I can go through here and make any changes that I want to. If I'd like to click in and delete items or add items, I can do that. So during this whole process that we're going to walk through in just a minute, I have the ability to go through and make changes. What you'll notice is that in the body of the document, we have some highlighting that's been added. And if I want to understand what that highlighting means, I can actually click the legend button here, and I can quickly see, oh, yellow highlighting indicates long cites, and this teal color indicates short cites, so on and so forth. You'll notice over on the left-hand side in the task pane, we have cites grouped into a couple of categories. So we have cases up at the top. If I collapse that, we can see statutes next. And then if we collapse that further, we can see other authorities, so on and so forth. And we have this category here called suspects. We're going to come back to suspects in just a minute, but this is a very important category when it comes to making sure that we gather everything in this document that needs to be included in the TOA. So let's go ahead and expand these back up, scroll up to the top, and talk a little bit about the content that's been identified here. So on any of these authorities, I have the ability to select it. I can select subsequent references to it. I can see each of the insights for this authority. And I can start to go through and gather context for how things have been used. Now, I mentioned earlier that we group these into categories. So maybe I'm done looking at cases and I want to quickly look at statutes. Well, I can go through and do that. I can quickly take a look at the statutes that have been referenced, so on and so forth. And once I've gone through and made sure that I'm comfortable with the content that we've identified in our different headings, I'll probably at some point come to suspects. And I'd said earlier suspects is important because it allows us to make sure that we gather all the content that we might want to gather and include that in our table of authorities. So suspects is content that we're not 100% sure what to do with, but we think that you probably at least want to take a look at it. This site is a great example of the kind of thing that will end up in suspects. This is a split site. We have Hunter v. Pacific Mechanical Corp, clearly a triable issue, followed by the recorder number. And this is the kind of thing that they tell you not to do in law school, but if I want to include this in my TOA, I can do that. Now, for the folks that are generating TOAs today, you know that it's really hard to get this kind of thing into a table of authorities if you're just using words TA codes. One of the really awesome things about Best Authority is that Best Authority doesn't use TA codes. And what that means is that as we go through and start to mark things for inclusion, we'll show you how you can preview your table of authorities and ultimately build it. But throughout that entire process, we won't need to put TA codes into our document. Our document's not going to look funky. And if this document leaves and then comes back, all the little changes that I've made, all the little tweaks to my TOA formatting, well, that information is preserved because when it comes back to me, Best Authority can recognize all the customizations that I made previously. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and mark this for inclusion in our TOA. So we're going to select this suspect here. Once we've selected, I'm going to click the Mark button. I'm going to mark this as a long site. And then here we can see how this site is going to be presented in our TOA. And if I want to get rid of this little chunk of text in the middle, I can get rid of it. Maybe I want to get rid of the extra quote, get rid of that too. And then once I get close enough to the formatting that's expected for my TOA, I can click the auto format button and have this go through and automatically format it. Now we've gone through, we've marked this, I'm going to click OK. And this is now marked as a long site that's going to be included in my TOA, but the text in the body of the document hasn't changed here, even though this is going to be included in my TOA in the proper format. And how do we know that? Well, let's go ahead and click the Preview TOA button and take a look. So you can see here, we've got our TOA preview up at the top, and we can see Hunter v. Pacific Mechanical Corp, and this is being brought in with the proper formatting. All right, so we've talked through how we can identify citations that have been identified by Best Authority. We've talked about how we can look at those suspects and ultimately decide to include things that maybe don't look like a site at first glance. Let's talk a little bit about customizing our TOA. So let's scroll through this table of authorities preview here. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to the bottom, and you'll probably notice once we get into this section around Sonoma County Code that I have 4 references to the Sonoma County Code in here, and one of them uses the word section instead of the marker to indicate section. Now, if I want to make this consistent across all of them, all I need to do is right-click, click Edit Authority, and then replace that word section with the section marker. Hit OK. And now when I generate this TOA, all these are going to look consistent. And again, if we look at the body of the document down in the bottom pane here, that word section didn't have to change. I didn't have to mark it for inclusion. I didn't have to do anything special from a formatting perspective. I just right-clicked and I changed it to a section marker. So we can go through and we can customize this TOA however we want to, right? We can make changes to it and take whatever actions I need to take in order to make this thing look right. Now, once I've gone through and I've marked up anything that I needed to mark up, I've made any changes that I need to make, I can close out of our review function. And now we're ready to build our TOA. So we're going to go ahead and click the build button. This is going to prompt me for which categories I'd like to include in my TOA. We're going to go ahead and do these 3. And this will now go through and build that table of authorities for me. And just like that, I got a working TOA. Now I think it's really important to be clear about what happens when I need to go through and make changes. So let's say I send this document off to somebody, they make changes to the body of the document, it comes back to me, and I need to rescan it and make sure that content is up to date and potentially update the TOA. Well, all I have to do is pop it back into review, and I can quickly go through and see new content in here. And then once I've gone through and made any formatting changes that I might need to make, again, we can just close review, click our build button, and this is going to go through and update the TOA for me. So at no point do I have to reformat all the little changes that we made when we did that initial pass at our TOA. As we go through and need to make changes or refine this document, I can do that and not need to rework all that content that I worked the first time. All right, so we've talked a little bit about TOA generation. We have just scratched the surface of the functionality here, but hopefully this is giving you some good context for how this is different from the existing manual processes that you might be going through today as you generate tables of authorities. If you have any questions in follow-up to this video, please feel free to reach out to Latera.